The battle for Warsaw certainly lives up to its reputation as the 18th most decisive battle in world history. What did it achieve in 1920 and what did it not? Did we win the battle but lose the war? So, while we celebrate this undoubted victory, what else can we learn from it? Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
The interwar period between 1918 and 1939 was an uneasy pause in a Europe still reeling from the First World War. Borders were redrawn, empires collapsed, and political ideologies began fighting for dominance. With her troops still away in foreign lands, Russia became the birthplace of one of the most disruptive forces born in the early 20th century, Bolshevism. Vladimir Lenin, alongside his comrades, launched the Russian Revolution in 1917, leading the masses to a future without a Russian monarch. The movement, massively popular among the working class and preaching socialism over monarchy, would go on to inspire the creation of the Soviet Union down the line. The Bolsheviks, however, didn't have their sights just on Moscow. They wanted to go west to preach their gospel in countries such as Germany and France, spreading the Soviet way across the old continent. Their ambitions of westward expansion would come to a halt at the hands of an old adversary, risen from the ashes of her partitioners, Poland. The Polish Minority Treaty, signed on the same day as the Treaty of Versailles, would return Poland to her former glory by the will of the League of Nations. After 123 consecutive years of partitions by Russia, Prussia, and Austria, Poland returned to the world map after the First World War. Simultaneously, Poland's revival meant the Bolsheviks now had a hurdle they needed to overcome to fulfill their goals, one that stood squarely between Soviet Russia and the dream of spreading Bolshevik ideals to Germany and beyond. To the Bolsheviks, Poland represented both a geographic barrier and an ideological enemy. Soviet propaganda painted the Polish state as a reactionary, nationalist obstacle to workers' liberation and Poles as agents of Western imperialism. With no other way west than through Poland, the Russians under new management geared up for a new war against their old enemy, one that is not known for giving up without a fight, even if outnumbered.
Our guest today is Marcin Kaczorowski. He's the board member of the Memory of Nations Foundation. Welcome to the programme.
Good to be here.
Our subject today is the Battle for Warsaw, 1920, one of several battles in the 20th century for Warsaw. But this was a victory, a very astounding victory by the Poles over the Bolsheviks. Can you just sketch us in the background to this victory, to this war after the First World War? Can you sketch in the diplomatic and some of the military chief points?
The most impressive thing to me is undoubtedly the fact that Poland was a freshly reborn country after over 100 years of being divided into the German, Austrian and Russian spheres. The Poles had to forge the army from the very beginning. Also mix people from all those different areas, from different empires, who had different way of thinking, different commanders from different military schools who served the imperial masters before, and they all managed to create a formidable force capable of stopping a huge invasion army of the Bolsheviks. In the end, in the battle itself, the forces are comparable because it's about 100,000 people on both sides. But if we look at the capabilities of both armies, Polish army will be about 1 million, the Bolsheviks about 3 million. Of course, Bolsheviks were still dealing with their internal affairs, fighting against the White Army, the imperial army. However, Poland was an important front. Seems like the Bolsheviks overestimated their own capabilities, and Comrade Stalin contributed massively to the Bolshevik defeat, because he was so sure of the Russian victory that he marched to Lvov instead of concentrating all the forces on Warsaw. Actually, he was first supposed to take Lublin with his forces and then move to Lvov, but he just marched on to Lvov, which proved to be a big mistake. And there are many factors that contributed to the Polish victory.
Poland, as you rightly says, finds itself to be an independent state, cobbled together from 3 imperial traditions. Can you give us an idea of why this Seesaw battle took place before the Battle of Warsaw in 1920? Poland went east to Kiev, then came back, retreated, pursued by the Bolsheviks. Why was this seesaw over the Eastern Europe? Why did that happen? Was that because the borders weren't agreed on at the Treaty of Versailles?
Of course, all the borders were on fire, as Marshal Piłsudski would put it, and the couple of uprisings against the Germans, and the border struggle against the Lithuanians, and the fight against the Ukrainians to regain the control of Lvov. This is just a few of those many examples. However, Imperial Russia was seen as this threat number 1 by Marshal Piłsudski, and his dream, and it was part of the Kiev campaign, was a part of his larger strategy to make Ukraine a strategic ally, and also to create a buffer against Bolshevik Russia. Initially, Piłsudski saw the Bolsheviks as the lesser evil. That's why he refused to support the Imperial Russians who were fighting Bolsheviks in 1920. Denikin made an offer to Piłsudski, but he didn't give up. He didn't want to give up any territorial claims against Poland. So he didn't want to give up the parts of what he considered Imperial Russian land.
So they wanted a revanchist.
He considered
policy.
simply Poland a part of Russia, a Russian empire. So that's why Piłsudski considered Bolsheviks, okay, they don't have territorial threats, and let them just finish each other off. But in the end, Bolsheviks rise as the winners of this domestic contest, and it's clear that they are not the lesser evil. They pose an even greater threat with their new universalist ideology that they want to spread to other countries, and then they come into clash with Poles in Vilna, because Poles organize self-defense in Vilna, but this self-defense becomes officially part of the Polish army. So that's where the first clashes happen between Polish and Russian units.
And bearing in mind the condition of Germany at the time, after the defeat of 1918, almost a civil war within Germany, revolution, chaos. Part of the Bolshevik aim was, like they said to appeal to their Red Army soldiers, over white Poland we will carry the Bolshevik revolution west.
Exactly, over Polish dead body.
Yeah.
So Poland was again the obstacle in spreading the revolution, and of course the new Red Empire's influence to the Atlantic. Perhaps, who knows when this revolution would stop. That's why you mentioned the Seesaw campaign or the Seesaw war. That's why Poles support the efforts of the not so influential Ukrainian circles that form the Ukrainian forces fighting side by side Poles, namely Simon Petlura is the leader I'm talking about, and they contribute with the forces of, let's say, about approximating at about one division. Poles send about 60,000 troops to Kiev, but they don't stay there too long because it's May 1920. And that really mobilizes Russians. They understand, okay, the war is really taking place in our imperial backyard. Yep. And they launch a massive counter-offensive, and Poles start to suffer major defeats.
As therefore they want Ukraine as part of an imperial Russia.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay, so they put everything on seemingly on hold. They go to Warsaw. What are the? Why were the Poles able to win at the very gates of Warsaw? You mentioned the fact that Stalin dithered in the south, didn't support Tukhachevsky, Marshal Tukhachevsky in the north. Was that the only reason, or was it because the Poles actually were pretty good?
Poles were pretty good, and the Poles had good friends. So we, amongst the good friends, we have to put the General Weygand. There was a very important French consultant who was promoting, well, slightly different idea of defending Warsaw, because he believed in position warfare. Of course, the Polish ingenious generals that worked out together with Marshal Piłsudski the plan of the massive counter-offensive, which required, however, hiding Polish troops, and they hiding the maneuver which would allow Polish troops to find themselves at the rear of the Russian army. Yep. So that's why that was actually Marshal Piłsudski's role. He chose from two options. General Rozwadowski, a great tactician, great strategist, he offered him two options to start the counter-offensive closer to Warsaw, farther away from Warsaw, which would equal to about 100 miles away. But that was the key to making this counter-attack invisible or a surprise to the Russians. And that actually, in the end, happened. So at the moment when Russians are crossing the Vistula River in the north, this attempt to repeat the maneuver from 19th century that helped to suppress the November uprising in 1830s. That fails because already Poles started maneuver and start surrounding Russian troops that are attacking Warsaw. And that's where Poles failed. I mean, they failed to surround the major forces, but most of them started to retreat. Some of the tens of thousands were taken captive. And this is how the Poles, through the counter-attack maneuver, managed to win the battle.
Before we continue with the ramifications of this battle, let's have a look at another clip.
Freshly revived after the First World War, Poland's grand return was met with a declaration of war rather than a standing ovation. The Red Army, emboldened by victories in the east, rapidly advanced toward Warsaw. Their aim, to spread the Bolshevik Revolution in Central and Western Europe. Under the command of Mikhail Tukhachevsky, Soviet forces managed to come within striking distance of the Polish capital. Warsaw's fall seemed inevitable. Instead, Poland staged one of the most remarkable turnarounds in military history. Under the leadership of Józef Piłsudski, the Polish command devised a bold plan aimed at catching the Soviet forces in a pincer movement. While the Bolsheviks pushed into Warsaw from the north and east, a secret strike group assembled by Piłsudski launched a surprise counterattack from the south. The vulnerable Soviet flank was shattered, splitting the Red Army's formations, severing supply lines, and causing panic among the attackers, all in one swift move. The brutal counteroffensive caused the Bolsheviks to flee, leaving vast amounts of equipment behind. But Piłsudski's men were not finished with the Red Army, giving chase to the remaining Russian battalions. Pursuing the enemy hundreds of kilometers, the Poles inflicted further damage to the Soviets at the Battle of the Niemen River in September. Poland's miraculous victory at Warsaw, dubbed the Miracle on the Vistula, halted the Soviet ambitions to spread communism into Western Europe. The defeat also humiliated the Soviet leadership, leaving a lasting scar on their pride that would fester throughout the interwar period. Bitter and vengeful over this defeat, the Soviet Union, now under Joseph Stalin's command, seized an opportunity for revenge by signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Nazi Germany in 1939. The pact, a plan to invade and partition Poland by its neighbors, proved to be both a strategic gain and delayed act of vengeance for what could only be described as the 1920 catastrophe on the Vistula from the Soviets' perspective. Decades later, despite devastation from World War II and decades under subsequent Soviet rule, Poland remains. It celebrates Armed Forces Day every August 15th as a reminder of the Poles who turned a nigh-guaranteed defeat into one of the most stunning victories in the country's history.
I mean, Poles are pretty good code breakers as well as they they showed 20 years later in the Second World War, they broke Soviet codes, didn't they?
They did, and thanks to this, most of the maneuvers that Russians were launching during the Warsaw battle were known to the Polish High Command, and even as a joke, the Polish code breakers would send the messages back quoting the Bible. So the Russian intelligence officers wonder what kind of gibberish is that, what kind of nonsense is that, who is sending this. However, considering the fact that it was quite a narrow victory, then we, of course, could wonder what would happen if. So the first thing that prevailed was the breaking the Russian codes. Another absolutely crucial factor was the Hungarian help. So sending whole wagons, whole trains with ammunition, and without this, Polish troops might have run out of ammunition. So the also worth stressing, Hungarians wanted to send even cavalry brigades, but they were stopped by the Czechs, who didn't want to let them through.
And there's also a problem with a kind of radicalised British trade union movement at the time, not wanting to send armaments to Poland.
Yes, and there were even proposals from the British diplomacy to actually stop any transports of weapons to Poland, and even to give the control of the Polish port of Gdańsk to the Russians as one of the conditions for ceasefire.
Why was this? Was this because the British, Lord George, wasn't a particularly friendly of Poland? Yes. Why was there a reluctance to deal with Poland as a power, as an existing power? Why did they want to deal with existing Russia, the heirs to an empire? Was it just because that's what they knew? They knew who the Russians were, and they could do business with them, I suppose, in Mrs. Thatcher's phrase.
That brings the overtones of today's approach to Russia. Don't irritate them. Don't make the bear angry. Don't disrupt the balance of power. Poland was a...
That's the power in the East.
Power in the East. Poland was the important, might have become an important power, also in a close alliance with France, and that, as we know, wouldn't be welcome on the islands. So perhaps one of the reasons why the British government wanted to restore trade relations as soon as possible with Russia, and also try to make the impression on the French that they are the only good intermediary with the Bolsheviks. Hence the reluctance to support the Poles, also the willingness to even cut the weapon supply, putting pressure on the French government to stop supporting Poles. However, the other friends didn't fail, and fortunately there was the Kościuszko squadron formed by the Poles and the Americans that contributed massively to stopping the offensive near Lwów, which was one of the three most important segments of the Polish defense, one in the north, the other one defending Warsaw and then launching counteroffensive, and the third most important segment was defending the Lwów region. And that's where the Polish and American airmen contributed massively, scaring off the horse units of the Bolshevik army.
What was Poland had to try and sign the Treaty of Riga to end the war. That's seen as a double-edged treaty. It was seen by some as a as a loss because Poland just wasn't strong enough to pursue the war. What was the logical outcome of this campaign, the 1920 campaign? You mentioned the fact that it outflanked the Soviet spearheads, so the Bolshevik spearheads, captured thousands of prisoners, and then what? Why is that not seen by some as almost as a unfulfilled victory?
First of all, the federationist idea of Marshal Piłsudski fails. The Ukrainian nation was not mature enough to take business in their own hands and decisively support Poles, who are also seen as the enemies. Just to recall the very bloody combat to defend Lvov in 1919. So the first of all Polish crusade to Kiev fails and is not sustainable. So the first condition towards creating a successful buffer against Russians fails. The Belarusian and Lithuanian territories were supposed to be closely allied or even a part of the Polish, Belarusian, Lithuanian Federation. This idea also fails. So Poland does not create enough sphere of influence to become a country powerful enough to fight off future power in the East, which is Soviet Union. Not to mention that our former enemies again will shake hands over our heads, and the Nazi Germany will work closely with Soviet Union.
Yes.
But even the Weimar Republic will try to strangle Poland economically, while Bolsheviks will very quickly modernize Russia, arm them with modern weapons, and build the mightiest army, or at least the largest army, the continent.
Is that that's what these two powers actually see? They see a Polish weakness, diplomatic weakness, and they can go, as you say, join hands and start to cooperate again.
Polish victory was not decisive enough to make Poland a major power in the East, and thus it sentenced Poland to seeking help elsewhere, either in France or perhaps in Great Britain or the United States, while being positioned between the traditional enemies.
A couple of final questions to you. What was the lesson for this victory, an undoubted technical victory? What was the lesson for the Polish army and the new Polish nation? Was it some sort of a delusion that they had beaten the Bolsheviks?
I don't think it was a delusion. I think in the overall, considering the Russian resources and the sheer numbers of the Bolshevik army, it was a fantastic success. It was a great success, and many in the West and in the East believe that Poland is over and it's just like a flash in the pan. But Poland showed that the ability to improvise, also the incredible morale that the Polish people had, helped to overcome the structural difficulties of an army that didn't have the structure yet. So I think it is a magnificent victory that actually that defended Polish independence for the interwar period. Without it, there would be no Poland, and Poland would be overrun very quickly. And all that Poles managed to build in the interwar period wouldn't exist.
Yes, that was where it started from. A final question to you. What is the Major General JFC Fuller, a British general, said this is the 18th decisive battle in world history. Is that true? How do you see it? How do you see it in the league table of decisive battles, I suppose?
That's the question for the experts in the field of the German history, I believe, in the first place. So what would happen if the Red Army managed to reach Germany? Would the revolutionary fervor be renewed, because as we know, the Freikorps managed to suppress the November Revolution quite effectively. But knowing the support for the communists in Germany, that could mean a major communistic victory, and then further spreading revolution, perhaps, farther west. Who knows where it would stop? Lenin's dream was taking it to the Atlantic, and it seems feasible if the Battle of Warsaw had been won.
Yes, the decisive battle game is one that historians play ad nauseam, I suppose. But Marcin Kaczorowski, thank you very much for coming to the programme.
Thank you.
That's it. Join us next time for How We Got Here, Tuesdays, 8:35 p.m. That's 20:35. Join us then.